Charles Taylor's monumental work, A Secular Age, 2007, stands as one of the most profound philosophical inquiries into the nature of modernity, belief, and the transformation of the Western world's spiritual landscape. Across its vast and richly textured pages, Taylor seeks to answer a deceptively simple yet historically charged question. Why was it virtually impossible not to believe in God in 1500, while in 2000 many find faith not only optional, but difficult? This question lies at the heart of his exploration of what it means to live in a secular age, not merely an era of declining religious belief, but one in which the very conditions of belief have been transformed. 1. The central question, from a world of faith to a world of options. Taylor begins by challenging conventional narratives of secularization, particularly those that equate secularization with the mere decline of religious belief or practice. The subtraction story, as he calls it, assumes that as reason, science, and enlightenment advance, religious belief simply fades away. Taylor finds this narrative reductionist and historically inaccurate. Instead, he argues that the secular condition is not the result of religion being stripped away, but rather the emergence of new frameworks of meaning that make belief in God one possibility among many. In pre-modern societies, faith in God was not a matter of personal decision, but an inevitable horizon of understanding. The cosmos itself was perceived as enchanted, filled with divine presence, spirits, and moral order. In this enchanted world, individuals saw themselves as porous beings, open to spiritual forces that acted upon them. By contrast, the modern secular subject is buffered, self-contained, rational, and closed off from such forces. This shift from the porous self to the buffered self is one of Taylor's most important conceptual innovations, encapsulating how the experience of being human has fundamentally changed. Chapter 2. The meaning of secular. Taylor identifies three senses of the word secular, each representing different aspects of modernity's development. 1. Secular 1, the traditional distinction between the sacred and the profane, as in the differentiation between clergy, religious, and laity, secular. 2. Secular 2, the retreat of religion from public spaces, institutions, and authority structures, the process often described by sociologists as secularization. 3. Secular 3, the focus of Taylor's study, a condition in which belief in God is one human possibility among others. In this sense, the secular age is not marked by the disappearance of faith, but by its pluralization. This third definition is crucial. Modernity, for Taylor, is characterized by immanent frames, systems of meaning and value constructed entirely within the natural or human world, without reference to the transcendent. Within this immanent frame, people can still believe in God, but belief now competes with naturalistic or humanistic explanations. The plausibility structures that once sustained faith as the default worldview have dissolved. Belief is no longer the naive option. It requires a leap, a personal choice. The Great Disembedding. A key historical process that Taylor describes is disembedding, the gradual separation of individuals and institutions from the cosmic and social orders that once gave them transcendental meaning. In medieval Christendom, the social world was structured hierarchically, with divine order mirrored in earthly relations, from monarchs and clergy to peasants and artisans. The individual's identity was bound up with this overarching spiritual and social framework. The Reformation, Enlightenment, and scientific revolutions initiated a long process of disembedding. Individuals came to understand themselves as autonomous, rational agents within a self-regulating, impersonal universe. Society itself became conceived not as a divine hierarchy, but as a collection of individuals bound by mutual interests and contracts. This new moral and metaphysical imagination made possible modern notions of freedom and equality, but at the cost of the unity and sacred coherence that once defined the cosmos. 4. The rise of the immanent frame. The immanent frame is perhaps Taylor's most influential concept. It refers to the shared structure of experience in modern societies, the sense that meaning, value, and fulfillment can be found entirely within the natural world, without recourse to transcendence. Importantly, Taylor insists that the immanent frame can be open or closed. An open immanent frame leaves room for transcendence or mystery, even if it is not explicitly religious. A closed immanent frame insists that only the natural, material world exists. Modern secular life, then, is not defined by atheism, but by the conditions under which faith must now be lived. Even believers inhabit a shared social space where the default assumption is that meaning is human-made, not divinely ordained. Taylor's insight is that secular modernity is not the absence of religion, but the proliferation of options, religious, spiritual, and non-religious alike, within a shared, imminent horizon. Ha-5. The Nova Effect and the Explosion of Belief Systems. Taylor calls this explosion of possible belief systems the Nova Effect, borrowing the astronomical metaphor of a star's spectacular expansion. In pre-modern Christendom, the moral and cosmic order was unified. One's spiritual path was largely predetermined by cultural inheritance. In modernity, that unity fractures into a vast array of possibilities. Organized religions, deisms, humanisms, existentialisms, spiritualisms, and atheisms. Individuals are now burdened or liberated with the task of constructing their own frameworks of meaning. This pluralism, however, does not mean relativism. Taylor emphasizes that modern individuals still seek fullness, moments of depth, moral orientation, or transcendence that give life significance. The search for fullness persists even in the absence of a shared metaphysical order. What differs is the locus of fullness. For some, it lies in divine relation. For others, in art, love, politics, or personal authenticity. Thus, the secular age is not empty, but cross-pressured, caught between immanence and transcendence, doubt and faith, autonomy and longing. 6. Cross-pressures and the fragility of faith and unbelief. Taylor's notion of cross-pressures captures the tension of modern existence. Believers are haunted by doubt, and unbelievers are haunted by a sense of loss or yearning for transcendence. The closed immanent frame never completely satisfies. Even secular individuals experience moments of awe or moral depth that seem to point beyond mere materiality. Likewise, faith in a secular age must contend with the constant presence of alternatives and skepticism. This dynamic leads to what Taylor calls the mutual fragilization of belief and unbelief. No position, whether religious, spiritual, or atheistic, can be held with the same unreflective certainty as in pre-modern times. Every worldview is vulnerable to challenge, yet this vulnerability is also the condition of modern authenticity. To believe or disbelieve sincerely in a secular age requires choice, a personal reflective commitment rather than inherited conviction. 7. The Ethics of Authenticity and the Moral Sources of Modernity. Taylor's earlier works, such as Sources of the Self, 1989, explore the moral sources that sustain modern identity, autonomy, dignity, and authenticity. In A Secular Age, he revisits these themes, arguing that even the secular moral order retains residues of Christian moral ideals. The modern emphasis on universal human rights, compassion, and the worth of the individual, for instance, are not products of disenchantment, but transformations of Judeo-Christian notions of love and the image of God in humanity. Thus, Taylor resists the sharp dichotomy between religious and secular ethics. The secular age did not simply reject Christianity, it re-articulated its moral intuitions in humanistic and immanent terms. The challenge, as Taylor sees it, is that in losing the transcendent source of these values, modern societies risk reducing them to instrumental or utilitarian concerns. The tension between moral fullness and moral flattening runs throughout his analysis. Beyond the subtraction story, re-enchantment and reform. One of Taylor's most counterintuitive claims is that modernity, far from being a purely disenchanted world, contains new forms of re-enchantment. The arts, politics, and even science can evoke experiences of wonder and transcendence. Moreover, many modern spiritual movements, from romanticism to ecological ethics, reintroduce a sense of sacredness into the immanent world. Taylor interprets these developments not as regressions, but as expressions of the persistent human longing for fullness. This perspective allows him to challenge both triumphalist secularism and nostalgic traditionalism. Secular humanism is not merely the negation of religion, but one mode of seeking moral and existential depth. Likewise, religious belief in a secular age is not a retreat from reason, but an effort to integrate transcendence within the modern horizon of freedom and authenticity. Taylor's goal is not to defend faith per se, but to describe the complex conditions of belief that make faith and unbelief both possible and problematic. Critiques and influence. Since its publication, A Secular Age has provoked wide debate across theology, sociology, and philosophy. Critics have noted that Taylor's narrative is heavily Western and Christian in scope, focusing primarily on the North Atlantic world. Others argue that his dense prose and historical breadth risk obscuring concrete sociological mechanisms of secularization. Yet, even his critics acknowledge the extraordinary richness of his interpretive framework. The book's influence extends beyond academia. It has shaped contemporary discussions on post-secularism, pluralism, and the persistence of religion in modern democracies. Thinkers such as Jürgen Habermas, Talal Asad, and Rowan Williams have engaged deeply with Taylor's ideas, recognizing his contribution to understanding how modern subjects navigate belief, meaning, and moral orientation in a fragmented world. 10. Conclusion. Living in a secular age. In a secular age, Charles Taylor redefines what it means to call our era secular. Rather than a time of unbelief, it is a time of contested belief, a world in which transcendence and immanence coexist in tension, and where faith must be chosen rather than inherited. Taylor's narrative transforms the secularization thesis into a story not of loss, but of transformation, from a world where belief was taken for granted to one where belief and unbelief are both viable, meaningful, and fragile options. The secular age, in Taylor's account, is thus neither wholly disenchanted nor wholly religious. It is an age of searching, an age where the quest for fullness continues under new conditions. In revealing the moral, existential, and historical complexity of this transformation, Taylor invites readers to see modernity not as the death of the sacred, but as a new chapter in humanity's ever-evolving relationship with transcendence.